Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm delighted to be joined by JJ Bull the Bullet.
Hello, Joe Devine.
Yes, welcoming also Jonathan Dog Mackenzie. Hi, John.
Bienvenue.
That's correct. What have we got for you today? Well, we've got some football. That's correct, because that's what you're here for. God knows why. The North London Derby, we discussed that to begin things with, and the Manchester Derby, a different derby in a different place. Very exciting, that one. Yet another loss for Liverpool against a resurgent Brighton. Are they resurgent? No, they're just surgent. Yeah, against a surgent Brighton. Well done to Brighton.
Sergeant Brighton.
Who's going to crawl out of the Premier League's bottom? We'll discuss that later. That's Steve Hackey wrote that down. Don't look at me like that. I'm just reading what the producer said. And of course, the rise of Napoli. We discuss them a little bit later on too. Now, speaking of Napoli, if you enjoy that little bit of the podcast, you may find yourself enjoying some fantastic pieces written largely by James Horncastle, the Athletic's Serie A correspondent. And you can find those by visiting theathletic.com/Tifo, theathletic.com/Tifo. John Mackenzie, what have you enjoyed most about The Athletic in the last week?
I have been very much enjoying Owen Brown's stuff. Do you know Owen Brown?
Who's Owen Brown?
Owen Brown is the Celtic correspondent for The Athletic. And
yes.
I always make sure that I keep up with his column because he's writing about Ange Postecoglou, my great love. So
Lovely.
I've been keeping up with him.
Okay, great stuff. And what about you, JJ Bull?
Well, if you also want to read about Napoli, you could also watch a video about it. We did a video a while ago in October about what makes Napoli so good.
That's
James
true.
Horncastle gave me lots of tips
Yeah.
to make the video.
Okay, well, there we go. That's it. You can watch our videos as well, so please go and do that and subscribe to The Athletic. But for now, we'll leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace of
Crabs.
Absolutely. Correct.
And momentum.
And momentum. Crabs and momentum.
And violence.
Sideways momentum.
Crabs, momentum, violence.
Okay. All of those things will leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace of crabs, momentum, and silence. Where else to begin, of course, but with Arsenal? Where else would we begin on a week such as this, when Arsenal extend their lead at the top of the Premier League table by 8 points over Manchester City? Although I think technically Newcastle are around there now as well, one extra game played. But let's begin with you, JJ Bull. Will Arsenal win the title?
They might.
They might. Yeah.
They have a bit of a gap, but I think they're not even halfway through. It's 19 games is halfway, isn't it?
19's halfway.
Yeah, so they're not there yet.
No, they're not.
I think they look very good. They have all the momentum and confidence just now. That's what you need. It's very, very important. They look really organised. They're strong tactically, but that's only a small part of it. I think it's more the confidence they have and the belief, and they keep winning games that should be tough. And I think they largely controlled this game. And it went how they wanted it to, whereas in the past you weren't maybe sure if they really had control, which is that they scored a goal or something like that.
Yeah.
I think they look excellent. I think City are having... The reason that they could probably win it now is that City are having one of those seasons where it's like they've achieved so much already, they're maybe just in a bit of a transition. They've got Erling Haaland, a bit of a change of system. Maybe there's one of those, and they keep dropping points that they shouldn't, and they don't have the confidence. But that could all change. Like, what's the difference now? 8 points?
8 points.
It's 2 defeats for Arsenal in a row, and City win 2 games, and then they play each other, and maybe it changes a little bit. Like, it happens so often.
I think one of the interesting things, is that, of course, that they come back from the World Cup and they're still excellent as they were before. That sort of unusual mid-season break didn't have the impact that it might have done. But John, from a points perspective, let's have a look at the table now. Arsenal, first place, played 18 games, 47 points, and then obviously the gap to 39 with Manchester City. 8 points ahead at this point in the season. It can't have happened that many times that a gap like that has been overturned.
Yeah, so in 18-19, I believe that Liverpool were 7 points ahead of Manchester City and then ended up runners-up in that season. So it has happened, but I don't...
It can and has happened.
Yes. But the big thing here, I think, is that this is about rates of change, isn't it? It's not about points total per se, because you can say, a few wins one way and it wins the other way, and before we know it, everything's narrowed up, and that can happen. But it's so unlikely for those sorts of things to happen unless one of the teams really drops off. So I tweeted out yesterday about how I said last week on the podcast that I think Manchester City are the best team in the Premier League. But on the basis of the way that Arsenal have been playing in the first half of the season, they're very well-deserved, title challengers. And I think that I said on the back of the first half of the season, they would very much be deserving of the Premier League. And a lot of people said, well, you don't win the Premier League in half a season. No,
did they say it in that voice?
Yeah, they did. They used that special font on Twitter.
The most annoying voice.
But the point I was making is that if Arsenal continue at this level that they've played in the first half, and Manchester City improve a lot, then Arsenal could still win the league, just continuing to be as consistent as they've been, because an 8-point gap is a massive one to overcome. If Arsenal manage to draw one of those games against Manchester City, then it really impacts their ability to start narrowing that gap. And the other thing to say is that, like, we talk about Arsenal playing Man City, playing Manchester United. The issue with Man City this season has been that they haven't been getting points in all of their games against weaker opponents, and they're the ones who look more flaky in that respect than, I would say, Arsenal and Manchester United for that matter.
Yeah, I can see real weird similarities between how Arsenal are doing this now to how Leicester won the league. And they've got an injury to Jesus, which is the only real injury they've had to deal with as far as I can think of right so far. And that could be the real thing. Like in previous seasons, they've had, I think Odegaard's been missing and Partey's been missing and all these sort of people that really help that team work. They've avoided that so far, so everything they want to do is working. They've also fostered this, the steps they've tried to take, or Arteta's tried to take from that Amazon documentary. We're trying to get the crowd closer to the players. That's definitely helped. So now, the stadium just seems more alive. When I used to go to the Emirates quite a lot when I first moved down to London, it was always really quiet, and it seems a lot louder now. And the fans just seem more up and at them. But what you also get is that it's like a siege mentality thing, that thing that Alex Ferguson always wanted. And there's always people talking on Twitter, I keep seeing, or just talking about how Arsenal, no one expects them to win, everyone's against them, there's no conspiracy against Arsenal, yet there's this thing where they shouldn't. I don't think many people predicted they would win the league this season, nor would they be in this position already. They've also got the two teams who should be at the top, Liverpool and Man City, in my opinion, who are nowhere near their best. City, not that far off, but they dropped to points that they maybe shouldn't do. Losing to Man United's a big one. And then Arsenal are the best of the rest by far, and they deserve to be ahead because they're playing really well, they're really cohesive, they're managing to avoid injury problems, and it's a tight unit that are working really well, and all those things together tend to be what you need. They're very hard to get all those things at once, and they've got that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, the siege mentality thing, because often you see coaches try to implement that even when it doesn't relate to reality. I think I think the truth is that probably maybe not a majority, but a larger number of neutral fans around the country would prefer Arsenal to win the league this season than Man City or Liverpool, with the exception of your Tottenham fans. I think everyone's sort of pleasantly pleased that might be the case, whereas you can imagine in London Colney, Arteta going, they're all against us, we've got to stick together, lads. Good example of what you were talking about, though. Gabriel Jesus being injured, we talked about this during the World Cup, and he'd been such a talisman for Arsenal in the first half of the season. Him and Zinchenko seeming to be those emblematic of winners arriving and showing the team how to do it. It seemed as though there was going to be a big problem. And it hasn't been, really. I mean, Eddie Nketiah, not like the best player in the world, but was pretty good in this game against Spurs. He played very well. He did exactly what a centre forward is supposed to do, I suppose. And whilst he didn't get a goal, he did create a couple of opportunities. They no longer look like the sort of team that definitely require a January signing, John.
Yeah, and I think that's a real testament to the system itself, right? We've talked about the system a lot, and it's easy when you have a season like Arsenal have had this season, and they've brought in players like Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus to be entirely in that mindset, right, where these are the players who've made them better. And there's an extent to which that's obviously true. Gabriel Jesus is a really, really elite striker and plays in a really unique way. Zinchenko gives them the ability to have a fullback who can invert. It's that sort of flexibility. We talked about this all season long. That's what's made Arsenal so dangerous. But it is worth saying that this system, Arsenal have improved in this system. It's taken them a long time to get this good. We spent a lot of I spent a lot of time doubting whether or not Arteta could achieve that, and then he's gone and done it. And I think it's worth recognising that the system does bring out the best in players. So even players like Gabriel Martinelli, last season people saying, "Oh, is there weaknesses in his game?" This season people are really liking him, and I think that again, that's all of these kind of things, when it's happening with a lot of players, it's probably a system thing rather than just individuals getting better as well. And I think we're seeing that with Eddie Nketiah. Like, the system is there, everyone knows what to do, he knows his role, and it makes everything so much easier when you're playing in that kind of setup.
Yeah.
Also, Jesus, the striker, hasn't scored a goal for Arsenal since 10th. No, wait, what was that month? The 1st of October? Was that the 10th month?
That's the 10th month.
There we go. Thank you. So that's the last time he scored for Arsenal. It was against Spurs, actually. And then since then, he hasn't scored any goals. Yeah. Okay. Then he got injured, obviously, so he's missing. And Nketiah, I think Thierry Henry spoke about him in a recent game. And I agree with what Henry says in that Nketiah looks like a really good squad player, and you can see he's got attributes there that he could go and become a decent striker for Arsenal. But I haven't seen enough of Nketiah in games I've seen to him so far to think that he'd be the real top level that they need. No, he's a really good squad player. Yet he's doing things in different games now, and his scoring record is really good at the moment. Yeah. So he's getting chances and finishing them. But he's doing a lot of things really well for that team that suit how Arteta wants that forward to work.
It works quite well to have an unselfish striker in that system. And I would say the thing I like about it, watching him, is, like you say, while he might not be at the moment at the very top level of the game, it's lovely to see a younger player playing the 9 role so well. Often, like particularly with Nketiah's build as well, you would associate a player his age, his build, with someone who is maybe more comfortable in the wide areas where they're better with the ball at their feet. They don't understand the game necessarily to the extent that they're required to play in the 9 role. Takes a bit more experience, and then maybe they develop towards that over time. But here's Nketiah, relatively young player, with a different build or profile to Wout Weghorst, good example of a classic 9 going to arrive at Manchester United soon. It's really nice to see a young player doing those things. Well, you don't see it that often.
Yeah, and he is doing a lot of the things that we talk about Gabriel Jesus being good at, which are maybe a little bit more unusual. So he can drop in and help out. I think he's been really good in the hold-up side of the game, because that's going to be the area that you're probably going to worry about with someone like Nketiah, because, as you said, he's not a strapping lad by any means, and it's really important for him to be able to drop in and win balls with centre-backs right up behind him, making it hard to do that, and he's been doing that well. He's finding space nicely in the box. He is being a box presence. There was that chance in the game yesterday when Xhaka clipped the ball through and he was just perfectly in space, didn't get the finish off, took maybe not the best touch, but like he's there, and that, as we always say, being a striker is a lot about being in the right positions at the right time.
You've got to show up.
But that's what gets you to the next level. So we say that he's not quite there yet. Like, what is it that gets him there?
Scoring the goal.
Well, I think you can strip it down more than that. It's decision making and like clinicality and being a killer. You always have people that talk about how you need to be ruthless and not be a nice guy. You need to be someone who is happy to go in and like just leave it about, annoy defenders, be really frustrating either by being so technically good. And it's just like that thing, that first touch he takes, if he'd taken it down straight in front of him, he'd have the option of hitting it either side of the goalkeeper, much more likelihood of scoring, but he doesn't. And is that something he improves over time? He's dead young, isn't he? How old is Nketiah? He's 23.
23.
He's the same age as Darwin Nunez. So like you think he has then got about 3-4 years to develop and go up there. But if he doesn't take those chances and start to prove that he does that sort of thing, but then he is scoring other goals. So it's really hard to tell like what his ceiling is.
I think he had 2.5 chances in this game, and I think a top level striker scores one of them on most of the time. But the point that John made before about the reason for Arsenal's success being related to the system, and also when you've got a player like Martin Odegaard behind you who's performing as he is this season, you don't really need to score. You just need to hold the ball up and make sure you get out of the way.
And you put another 2.5 years into Nketiah, and you might have a top level striker without having spent 50 million on someone.
For sure.
And he understands the club and the way they want to play, and it works much better for everyone.
Well, we spent a lot of time talking about their attack. The second half of this game, we'll come to talk about the game a little bit more when we speak about Spurs, but the second half of the game, John, was a little bit more about Arsenal's defence, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I can tell you actually, handily Steve Hankey has popped this in the podcast plan that Arsenal have the second most clean sheets in the Premier League this season, 9. First is Newcastle with 11.
Yeah, the general tenor of Arsenal games this season has been that Arsenal come out quite aggressively in the first half, and they press high as well to sort of match that as well. And we've talked a lot about how in the first 30 minutes they're scoring more than they're conceding, and that's a pretty good
talk about it more
recipe for
don't
for
leave it
success.
out.
Yes, and this game followed that sort of timeline, right? They came out, they were aggressive in the first half, they went 2-0 up, very much deserved, and then in the second half it became more about managing the game, but they did allow a lot of chances, I think, to Spurs. I think I've only seen a couple of XG models on this one, but I think most of them had Arsenal generating more expected goals. Now, we need to talk about game state, because Arsenal were in a position where they were 2 goals up at half-time, and they could afford to drop off the intensity, especially in the higher areas, and allow Spurs to come forward. And Spurs, as we know, are generally more intense in the second half of games as well.
And just to clarify, by game state, you mean the state of the game, i.e. Arsenal are 2-0 up, and therefore you would expect Spurs to need to attack more aggressively than they do at 0-0.
Yeah, and I think with a 2-goal buffer as well, Arsenal might be happier being a little bit more passive, because they've got that ability to. They've got that 2-goal cushion to play with.
They've also got games coming up. I mean, it's cluttered until the end of the season, isn't it? So if you are 2-0 up in a game which takes a lot of intensity, if you can bring that intensity down and relax your players a little bit, then you would, wouldn't you?
I think so, yeah. But I guess to come back to the game state thing, you can rack up a load of expected goals at a 2-0 game state when you're 2-0 up, and I think that looks slightly different to racking up a load of XG if you're 0-0, right?
Sure.
So it's worth saying that.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Well, let's talk about Spurs now, because I think it's fair to say, JJ, that this game is, it says a lot about Arsenal, but it probably says more about Spurs at the moment. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know if we learned that much about Spurs from this game other than what we already knew, is that they struggled to create because they rely an awful lot on wing-backs being part of the forward line, and then everyone else is meant to defend in a certain way. And I think if you don't get results and you're playing with a very demanding manager like Antonio Conte, with a very high... he wants a lot of high-intense runs, he wants you to do a lot of off-the-ball work, in the hope that then grinds out a result and you can get forward from that. But you need really good wing backs. Like, they want to sign people like Pedro Porro. It sounds like he's going to be so good, that guy. Get him in now. It's a great signing if they can get him. Or Denzel Dumfries. It'd make a huge difference because they'd get another high quality right wing back. So they've got Matt Doherty. He's fine. And then Arsenal were able to play their exact normal system, but then just drop Saka back into a wing back role when they need to have the 5 to cover them. So then that negates what Spurs want to do going forward. Heung-min Son's not been the same player this season. Kane is having a quietly amazing season, scoring loads of goals. Kulusevski's back, so that's where most of their creativity comes from. Yeah. But if you can lock him down, and they seem to, there's occasional moments when he'll make things happen because he's so good.
It's also he's got the the issue with being a left-footed player on the right-hand side, that when he wants to play those crosses in, it's quite easy. It's interesting to watch Arsenal defending him, trying to show him down the line. I think
you can definitely get so what teams will do in the week before a game match is they'll have one day they'll arrange a match between their first team and either the second 11 or the youth team, who are set up exactly as the opposition will, and how Spurs play. Yeah. There's very little variation in how they play. It just depends on how well the individuals do. But the hope for Conte is that it's defensively solid and it gives them a threat on the counter. But you see, Arsenal's defensive line was a little bit deeper in this game, just to stop the players who are really fast getting behind, as did in the game that they won 3-1, I think it was, early in the season. And I think what you see with Spurs is that players just aren't responding as much to what it is they have to do. Like, when you look at Arsenal, cohesive, all aligned, and what they're doing is quite fun and it's working. So they're playing good football, really high tempo, one-touch passes, and it's really nice, lots of movement. Spurs don't really do that. It's all very predictable and goes through the certain ways, but does work with good players. It's proven. Conte knows how to win league titles. He's done it before.
The key is the good players, though, isn't it? I mean, we had this conversation last night, John, with Conte. We've seen him in the Premier League before, as JJ says. He's won it before. He's won it with arguably better squads. I mean, is this Conte? Does he need the players to be of a certain degree in order for his approach to be effective?
I think that it's partly that. But I also think that a lot of it comes down to the league, and it comes down to what we're talking about in terms of pressing. So we talked about how when Arsenal came out in the first half, they were pressing really high, aggressively. And it means that you can really stop Spurs from getting the ball into those areas, namely Kulusevski, where they're getting a huge amount of really incisive progression. if you can stop them doing that, then Spurs don't have anything. So they generated very little in the first half. They were the second goal comes from a kick from the goalkeeper, I think, which Harry Kane challenges for. Arsenal win, and then the ball comes back, and Arsenal, obviously it's a really nice goal from Ødegaard, but it's from basically Arsenal being able to make sure that Spurs can only get the ball into those advanced areas in really inefficient ways, and then they capitalise on that. In the second half, Arsenal's press drops off a little bit, and then suddenly Spurs are able to get the ball in much more efficient and effective ways to Kulusevski, and that's when the problems start emerging. And I think flipping that on its head, I think the issue that Spurs have is that they're similar to Arsenal in that or the way that Arsenal played in this game, in that they have a really good aggressive high press at times, or they have a low block, and they don't really have much in between. And I think the problem is that regardless of whether or not it's worked in the past for Conte, being able to sit in a low block and then hit in the counter, versus having periods where you can press high and aggressively and win the ball back. The issue for me is more that he needs to have some kind of middle ground where the game isn't just simply losing control, or he's not losing control of the game. So
a mid block, may I suggest?
Yeah, a mid block is, I think, is the way to go here. And there's certain teams this year, like Fulham, for example, a great example of a team who are able to mid block really well, and it allows them to control the games enough for them to get upside when they need it, and then to not lose control when they don't. And
let me tell you, Fulham have mid-blocked their way to 6th place.
Yeah.
Did you know that? They're in 6th.
They're
right
really
now.
good to watch as well. They're playing nice football.
Well, we'll come to talk about them. Actually, we won't. We'll talk about them another time.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with Conte, then it feels to me like, because in the Premier League the out of possession stuff is so so good for the opposition.
Yeah.
You really have to be able to control games against everyone. Even the teams at the bottom are able to control games, and so we've seen Spurs move from this sort of situation where they want to be low block and counter, but then teams are able to actually stop them from scoring in those ways. And so it's only when Spurs are coming out in the second half, when they're down goals, then sort of really going aggressive, that they're able to turn things around. So I think with Conte, I think maybe his style of play doesn't quite have so much upside in, one, the modern game, but two, maybe the Premier League.
Oh.
Well, I think it's not even just getting like better players. It obviously is, but it's getting the right players to play the way you want to, or the right characters. And Conte always seems frustrated. He seems to realise that the ceiling is about 4th or 5th for what he's got, unless they invest heavily. And I can imagine it's very frustrating being a Spurs fan, continually knowing that you're just never going to be able to compete with everyone else around you, but you sort of are. And then you watch teams like Newcastle fly up above. Obviously, they have a lot more funding in the background going on. And then if you look at, again, comparing the two clubs, Arsenal and Spurs, like Arsenal waited with Arteta, were patient, and the club are aligned. So what Arteta wants to do is in line with what Edu is doing. They didn't bother spending more on Mudryk because it didn't align with what the vision was. That's exactly what they do. Spurs don't have that, seem to have that, again, the cohesion between the management and what the actual club wants to do. And you can sort of see it play out in the pitch.
Fans very unhappy at the moment.
Yeah, they would, because you're always stuck, and it's just like, if you're a supporter and you like put a lot of what your identity is on who you support, and that's what your weekends are spent doing and your weeknights watching this team, and they never go anywhere. It's just pointless. What's the point of life?
Indeed, what is
you
the
just
point
sort of trip
life?
along doing nothing. You're never going to achieve anything. It's all right. And the thing I was going to finish off with, you look at Arsenal versus Spurs, is that Arteta, that all worked with Arteta. Spurs sort of had that with Pochettino. They had that, and then it didn't work anymore for Pochettino. And then they got rid, and now they're just sort of stuck.
What was that list of things you just said? Tripping along, not really doing anything.
Yeah.
What were the other ones?
Not going to achieve anything.
Yeah. That's you, listener. That's you. What he's just said. Think about it. Think about your life. Yeah?
But if you
It's me
start
as
doing
well.
it today, you can achieve it all.
Nonsense. Welcome to John and JJ's business school.
This is one of the chapters.
This is, yeah.
That's
this is how
right.
you-
If you start now, you will have started.
Don't start later. Start now.
I think start
Unit
tomorrow.
6.
It's
No,
fine.
start now.
Do you know? I had a very interesting experience the other day. I got a delivery, a grocery delivery. You know, one of the quick ones, one of the ones that comes in 30 mins or so. Yeah. Listen, people, if you live in the countryside or somewhere where this service isn't available, in major cities like London, you can order someone to collect things for you from a small convenience store, and they arrives in 30 minutes. And I had a dinner, and I was like, want an ice cream. I want an ice cream. So I did that. I got myself an ice cream along with some other things, to make it seem like it wasn't just the ice cream. Really, I only really wanted the ice cream. But I got some other things like shower gel. and, you know,
for the ice cream.
capsules.
To go with the ice cream.
No.
Yeah.
Just to make it seem like the delivery driver wouldn't think I was just getting ice cream.
You're trying to trick him.
Trying to trick him. He goes, "Oh, this guy wants ice cream and to clean his home. You know, he must be a normal person."
And when you turned up, you were just completely naked and like, "Oh, my shower gel, just what I needed."
Here, yeah. Anyway, the point is, I got the, you know, you normally eat something, or you drink something, or you smoke something, or you do something what you don't want to do, and after you've done it, you go, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that," you know, or you think, "Oh, I've got to change my life tomorrow. I've got to clean my house." I had that feeling between ordering it and it arriving. I didn't even get to eat it. Before I didn't eat it. Still in my freezer. You know, I had the feeling. I never had that before I've even enjoyed it.
I have few doubts that you will find time to eat that ice cream another time.
I'm going to eat it later. I've been thinking about it all day.
Did you use the shower gel?
I did use the shower gel.
Did you eat the shower gel? Yeah.
Did I eat the shower gel? I did, yeah.
And just rub the ice cream on your body.
That explains the foaming at the mouth.
Speaking of foaming at the mouth, is it time to have a conversation about Hugo Lloris? Does that work?
Sure.
No, that doesn't work. Just to be clear, that was a completely incidental segue and not related at all to Hugo Lloris's inability to make that save.
Yeah, I mean, Hugo Lloris is making lots of mistakes nowadays, and it's hurting Spurs.
It's hurting them.
I'm not a goalkeeper expert,
no,
but I know that what he did yesterday probably didn't help them.
Yeah.
So
probably bad. Yeah.
Probably bad.
And again, like
he's been off the boil. On and off the boil, let's be fair to him. He occasionally, you know, well, I think it's half the time he has very good performances, and you see glimpses of the goalkeeper that he was for about 50% of the time. The other half just seems like he's completely lost. I mean, he's quite old now, isn't he?
He's captain of France. He just reached the World Cup final.
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely.
But it reminds me of, I mean, he's like club captain, really important, obviously, in the dressing room, and plays to a very high standard, always has done, was at one point one of the best goalkeepers in Europe, if not the world, whatever. Mm-hmm. But then that Aberdeen, Joe Lewis, was very, very good. He was probably the best goalkeeper in the league for a long time at Aberdeen.
I love how there's always an Aberdeen.
Well, it's just, I think you learn a lot about football from watching
Aberdeen,
really shit teams,
right? Yeah.
Like often.
Okay.
And because it's such a low level, you can really see the difference between someone who is all right and someone who is good. And Lewis was genuinely good. Then started making little errors. You forgive him because he's been so good. He was club captain as well. And then after about another,
was he a World Cup winner?
No, he was not. No.
Okay.
But the equivalent is like beating Rangers once.
Right.
And so then he started making more mistakes, and then just replaced him, and it's much safer now. It's just much better.
It's sad,
even though I like Joe Lewis,
when you have to take them to the sacrificial, you know.
Yeah. It's just one time too many, and then
the pyre.
How many more times has Lloris got to make the errors?
How long until Lloris goes to the pyre? 36 years old now.
Yes. I mean, the thing with Lloris has been that he's always been a good shot stopper, right? One of the best in the world. And there have been deficiencies to the rest of his game, which I think have been okay to deal with, as long as you're in a situation where you're getting that upside from shot stopping. And at the moment, you're not getting that upside from shot stopping as much. We're certainly getting more handling errors, etc. And so, you know, it comes a point where you kind of think, bring in a different keeper, and you're going to solve a lot of problems here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of handling errors, let's have a break. Ah, yes, welcome back. Lovely break. Another huge derby that happened over the weekend. Of course, Manchester United, Manchester City. Can you guess? It was the Manchester Derby. Yes, very exciting. Now, two teams were involved in this game, JJ Bull. Let's talk about them in order. Manchester United have won 9 games in a row. Are they legit title challengers? 1 point behind Man City now? Same number of games played?
Well, they might be. They're not too far off it. Anything can happen with a couple of wins. And
That's
I don't
true.
know. They're all right. They're winning loads of games in a row. That helps. They're starting to get a bit of momentum going between them as well. Marcus Rashford's playing very well.
They look quite teamy, don't they, in the way that we were just talking about Arsenal being teamy.
I think what you can see is that the players believe that what Ten Hag wants them to do is the correct thing, and they buy into it. And he's raised the levels of players and dropped the ones who were awful. Yeah. So like Maguire's out, gone. Luke Shaw's playing at centre back.
Well, Maguire was out after a slight injury or slight illness when Luke Shaw first played at centre back. I don't know what the situation is now, but Luke Shaw did start at centre back again with Maguire on the bench in this game.
Yeah, he's decent enough. Like it's difficult squad management because you have is he captain of England? No, it's Harry Kane, isn't it? He's captain of Man United. It's really difficult to manage
I thought
that.
you were talking about Luke Shaw.
No,
you mean
about
Harry
Maguire. It's very difficult to manage that
That's right.
situation.
He's the
because
captain.
You don't want to upset people and like damage an asset that you have that you might want to use. You can't.
Starting a fullback ahead of you at centre back is quite damaging for
But
a club
Shaw
captain
can
centre
play
back.
that. Like he can play that position. He's decent at it. He's just a good He's a good footballer, and it's. I mean, you got Varane next to you, kind of walking you through a game. I think, like tactically, Man United are way better than ever they were.
Yeah.
They relied a lot on like the Solskjaer years and going on was always playing on the counter, sitting back and hitting, which has worked in the past against Man City and Liverpool, those sorts of teams. It's worked.
Yeah.
This one here, I think, absolute like plan from start to finish and what would happen. This is what we do. If this happens, this is what we do.
I was going to ask you. Man City looked quite bad in this game.
Yeah.
Was it because they were poor, or do you think it was more to do with the fact that Man United made them look bad?
It's a little of column A and a little of column B.
Yeah.
Man United lined up with this. It's a 4-2-3-1, but the first line is like a 4 with one slightly deeper, and so they're trying to be quite narrow and compact. And behind that first line of 4, I think it's man to man or a bit of mix, isn't it? Behind that, so
Fred on De Bruyne was a quite an enjoyable element of that game.
Well, it'll change in different phases of the play and different bits of the pitch. But the first line when City are building, the whole idea is to stop them playing into the players who can control the game, like Rodri, De Bruyne, Silva, Foden. They just hardly got a touch. You look at touch maps. Holland's touch map is basically in the centre circle because he started dropping deep, trying to get on the ball to get touches.
It was kick off.
Yeah, and then it's to do with the way Man United played. Like, not everyone's involved actively. They're not. You don't see them tackling or making interceptions, but just by being in the right position at the right time, the spacing's perfect. It forces City to make passes they don't want to make, which slows down the tempo. And then what you saw in the second half, I think, from City was they definitely increase the tempo and stop taking so many touches on the ball. So that's how you change it and really get into the game. I think that maybe they started having the fullbacks play slightly narrower as well and move the wingers out. Small tactical things like that. It's a little bit of there's two sides to it because its tempo was much faster and that's what they needed to do. But to be able to do that, you have to have clear passing lanes free and players in space to be able to do that. And it's they started a bit slow. They're in a little bit of a dip at the moment. City, they're not playing with the same speed and energy and aggression that they normally do. But I think that'll come back I think they'll finish strong.
Yeah,
you saw that. So it's a little bit of Man United did play in a certain way to make them play badly, but City didn't help themselves.
Yeah, the match of the day analysis of this game was quite good. They showed, I think, 4 or 5 very good runs into space that Erling Haaland made. Where the direct pass sort of didn't come and the players would kind of add an extra link in between the two. By the time it gets to him, it's too late. So you watch that back and you think actually there were a number of opportunities for them just with that slight change or additional directness, which they did increase in the second half, as you said. I mean they could have scored goals in the game, couldn't they?
If you play Haaland in behind those chances, sure enough he might get. You think he'd score, and that would be how you want to play. But that's not how Guardiola wants to control the game. Because if you put the balls through every single time, the defence will just drop off you a little bit, and then maybe try and deny him. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that if you get in behind, it might then come back the way towards you, and you'll concede in the counter attack. So you want to control the game, get your players in the right position, so you've got your rest defence there, so you can easily then just have control of the pitch and stop the opposition being able to counter you. So Bernardo Silva's quite guilty for it a lot. Like he'll take the ball forward. Haaland, I remember one particular run where Haaland just like sprints. He's at full pace, and if the ball comes in, he's in behind. But no one else is in position to be able to deal with it if it goes wrong. So it's all about being safety first. You can push up the pitch and get in there. And then what they're trying to do is add this amazing striker to what City already do and how they've controlled games and won titles in the past. And you want it to suddenly change to being only on the counter-attack, playing him in. I mean, it's a way you can win games, but you want to add that to make yourself better. And if he keeps making that run, defenders are going to get tired. Eventually, they'll just not think the ball's coming, and that's the time to switch off. And then he's clean through, and that's how you get your goal to win. But you still get control of the game. I think that's why they're doing it.
Okay, fine. We should probably reference the offside or the non-offside, because that was the contentious issue from the game. Now, normally we wouldn't talk about offsides or whether a penalty was a penalty. But it's worth doing it in this instance because it's quite confusing and everyone seems to agree. John, they changed the rule, and so, I mean, by the letter of the law, it's interpretable. However, I think everyone thinks that this was obviously offside.
Yeah, they were mentioning on their coverage that the rule had been changed. I actually tried to find out when the rule had been changed and what the rule change was.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at the offside rule as the FA define it, there's a number of bullet points that describe when a player is interfering with play
from an offside position.
In an offside position,
Yeah.
and the problem is that it actually sounds as though a couple of those bullet points refer to things that look very similar to what it was that Marcus Rashford did. Now,
Yes.
the explanation given by Peter Walton on the live coverage was that the rule now states that you're not interfering with play unless you touch the ball or if you stop an opponent from being able to touch the ball.
Yes.
Which he seemed to think was, well, obviously this is an example of that. But again, you're at a situation now where the interpretation of that seems different depending on what, because as we talked about it before, everything that Marcus Rashford does changes the way that the opposition behave, and therefore theoretically could impact the way that they're going to touch the ball.
Can I draw an analogy here for you, John?
You
Would
can.
you mind if
Does
I
it involve ice cream?
No, it doesn't. I wish it did. It involves Rocket League, my second favourite thing after ice cream. John and I play Rocket League a lot, JJ. And we're very advanced at the game now. As when we come up against the children that play the game, we crush them. But when you play the game for a long time, you've got muscle memory. Yeah, your instincts are ahead of your thinking brain. And there's something that we try to do to each other very regularly called faking. We fake each other. It's the height of achievement in Rocket League. If you fake someone, a good example would be ball is rolling sort of towards the goal. You're firmly behind it. You're rushing towards it. And there's John rushing to get back to try to cover the goal. He jumps to dive in front of where he thinks you're going to hit it. But at the last second, you stop and you watch John just fly past, and then you roll it into an open net. You know, that's the kind of peak achievement you can get in Rocket League. I say this because, being someone who's probably as good at Rocket League as a Premier League footballer is at football, I know the impact that the expectation of what is going to happen can have on what you do. And knowing that, watching what Marcus Rashford did by that ball yesterday or the day before, it's so clearly interference. The goalkeeper, it stands where he stands because he thinks Rashford's going to shoot, right? So he potentially has the option of saving what Bruno Fernandes' shot if he moves. The defenders don't push towards it because Rashford is there. They're all already doing this on the basis that Rashford is definitely offside and is going to touch the ball. It's inarguable that it's not interference. I mean, technically, we can have the conversation about interpretation, but the rule is just wrong if it allows that to be the case, right? And even Manchester United fans appear to agree that it was stupid.
It's offside. I think a better Rocket League analogy would be if you put your hand into the screen and pushed it into the goal.
I would like to try that. Yeah.
It's just like it just shouldn't count.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that in the laws of the game, you have all of this specific wording, right? Using the phrase interfering with play. And people then start arguing like the ins and outs of what interfering with play means. But if you ask most people, maybe Manchester United fans aside,
I don't even think them aside.
Yeah, I think a lot of them would agree. But if you ask a lot of people, have Manchester United benefited from having someone in an offside position there?
Yeah.
You have to say yes. And which raises the question of whether or not the rules are up to scrutiny. But this has always been the way. The rules always do reveal themselves to be vague, and there's been no better age than the age of VAR for people to start realising actually maybe some of the rules that we have aren't really fit for purpose.
No, fine. Well, I guess also it helps in a game where Manchester United won anyway, that they certainly looked up to task, at least as much as Manchester City looked like they'd tooled down. I don't think there are too many people saying that the outcome of the game was super unfair, because I think you rerun that 100 times. If the performances are the same both sides, then that result
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
You don't agree with that?
Well, I think viewing that game from a timeline position, so in the first half, I think Manchester United were very good at stopping Manchester City from doing what they wanted to do. What they did, as JJ said, was that they kept the middle really compact. They marked player for player in the middle, and they allowed space in the wide areas for Manchester City to exploit. And Manchester City played with a flat back four, so they were trying to get their fullbacks into that space. And ironically, it didn't really work because actually I think Manchester City's best attacks come when they're able to exploit that space in the middle. So what happened in the second half, as JJ said, you started seeing Man City's fullbacks inverting, and weirdly, like by making the centre even more congested, what actually happened was it allowed Manchester City to have more space because they started doing what you need to do in man marking situations, which is move your players out of position. So what we started seeing was the structure for Man United getting pulled apart in the middle. Kevin De Bruyne pushing out into wide areas. We saw Haaland dropping in deep. So lots and lots of positional movements and pulling. I think especially when you create space in the wide areas by making your fullbacks really narrow, you can go direct to the wide players who can drop in. Mm-hmm. That pulls one of the fullbacks out of position. And because Manchester United wanted to be really strict at the back, you're seeing Casemiro dropping deeper and deeper to cover for that. And again, that creates more space in the middle. So in the second half, Manchester City get the goal, and I think were well worth it at that point. Now, as you say, there was a tempo shift from Manchester United, I think, with 20 minutes to go. They shifted. I think Anthony came on as a 9, weirdly, early on. And I think the idea then was...
At half-time, he replaced Martial, I think probably through injury,
Yeah, and I think the idea was they wanted to go quite intense at the Man City backline, because Manchester City were going to try and control the game from the back a little bit more. They switched that with 20 minutes to go, moving Anthony out wide, and that made their press a lot more dangerous, I thought, in the forward area. But I think everything twists on that one goal, because up until that point it's 1-0 and I think City do start dropping a little bit, but Manchester United, I think, really get a boost from that goal counting. Sure. Obviously you're level, and then the other goal comes very soon afterwards when Man City are in a little
There's
bit
definitely something to that, like you're psychologically you start going, that's so unfair,
that's
ridiculous.
If that happened to me, I would lose my head on a football field, and I think
often when we're playing Rocket League you do.
And they score like 3
all those
minutes
injustices
later.
John's got this great thing, by the way, when we play Rocket League. Sorry to talk about Rocket League again, but
I really don't care about it.
It's more about talking more about Jon Mackenzie and his psychology. You see him here, lovely guy, friendly guy, chirpy, interested, curious, yeah? What you don't see is the bitter, dark
just a great
side
competitor,
of Jon Mackenzie.
I like to think.
We have a little group of friends that we're friends, of people we play video games with, I would say. Hey. And John's favourite thing to say, and John is someone who doesn't know when a joke's gone too far, is, whenever anyone plays on my team, they play badly.
I've heard this before, yes.
And I do wonder, who the common denominator is. But speaking of common denominators, Brighton and Hove Albion 3-0 Liverpool. What a superb result for Brighton. JJ, did you catch this one?
I saw, because it was a 3 p.m. kickoff, wasn't it?
Yes.
So unless I went to the pub that I know that has the illegal TV, I couldn't watch it. But I saw the highlights and I've watched my scout in it. Yeah.
Okay.
Jurgen Klopp described it as like the worst game, not just at Liverpool, that he's had. But hasn't he had a problem with Brighton before? They've lost to them before, haven't they? And I think they've been worse in previous games from what I've seen from the video that I've watched.
I think
they're just all
has
in a
problems
mess
with Brighton nowadays, and nowadays with Solly March as well. I mean, this is obviously De Zerbi's Brighton. John, you had a video out this morning about De Zerbi's Brighton as well. Very impressive. It's currently in 7th place.
Super fun, really, really fun team. And in the video, I talk a lot about how what they're doing is they're trying to develop these artificial transitions. So usually when you're doing transition football, you're sitting deep, absorbing pressure, giving the opposition like plenty of the ball, and then just trying to hit them on the break. That obviously comes with a bit of a risk. And so what we're seeing with De Zerbi is like this hybrid system where rather than allowing the opposition to dictate the play, you hold the ball as much as you can and then try and generate these artificial transition, so the same conditions that you get from sitting deep and hitting into space. So what you get is this like long protracted build up, really, really slow, and then a really quick tempo change, moving the ball into the central midfield area and then looking to get in behind. And it's super fun to watch because of that tempo change. And I think players, particularly Kaoru Mitoma on the left hand side, they've got at the moment just a really, really fun transitional dribbler. And their central midfielders in Caicedo and Pascal Gross, so the ball just moving into that area and then this really explosive like transitional football getting in behind and generating chances, and they absolutely killed Liverpool on the transition so many times.
As well, it's a strong Liverpool team they put out. Like in theory it's their best midfield, Fabinho, Henderson and Thiago. I'd say that's their strongest midfield. And you'd think the weakness would come on the left side defensively because it's Thiago who's not the strongest at trying to stop that sort of stuff. But you've got Robertson and Kanate, I think he's a brilliant player, and Matip's a good player. And then you've got Brighton put Mitoma as Japanese winger, who wrote He wrote dissertation, I think it was. Is it a master's or just a dissertation? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's funny that everyone talks about him going to university and like studying dribbling.
Yeah, he wrote a dissertation on how on the effects of dribbling and what it can do to opponents.
Yeah.
So what certain things can do to put opponents off. So he's basically written a thesis on this.
Yeah.
And they put him up against
A thesis?
Yeah.
Wow. It was a dissertation a minute ago.
I don't know the differences.
Same thing, Joe.
Didn't you have a master's?
Hmm?
You got a master's?
Yeah, I
haven't
do.
you?
So I've written one of them, whatever it's called.
What's the
Yes, it's the
difference
same
between
thing.
a thesis and a dissertation?
They're just the same thing.
No, they don't call them the same thing, though, do they? They call it a thesis when you've done a bigger thing, like a PhD or something, and then they call it a dissertation when you're doing it in a
What's the
degree
difference?
level.
So as a primary difference is a versus thesis. It's the degree programs that require these projects. Students in a master's degree will write a thesis, whereas students in a doctoral degree will do a dissertation.
Oh, so the doctor's ones, the PhD ones, is that a PhD?
But my one was called dissertation. I had to hand it in. So
during your masters.
Yep.
Do you think that? Do you worry that means you haven't really got one?
I think-
no, I didn't know I had
where
a
did you
master's
do
until my
your-
friend told me later.
Where did you do your masters?
Aberdeen.
At the same university that you did your. You're one of those people, you didn't leave home to go to university.
Well, I moved a long bus. It's like an hour bus journey.
You went an hour on the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
it's
was
far
still
enough
in
away
the
that
same
it's
city.
far. Yeah.
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 And what about you? Did you leave home to go to university?
I did.
How far did you go?
I went a 5.5 hour train journey away
Woof.
from home
Yeah.
to St Andrews in Scotland, very
Okay.
close to Aberdeen.
I had a band. I thought it was doing quite well at the time.
Oh, you wanted to stay in the band.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was your mum and dad in the band, or
No.
no, it was friends from the local area?
People from Aberdeen I knew. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
talented people. Yep.
Okay. What were their names?
Adam and Tom.
Were they studying at the university as well?
No, Adam did a series of law degrees that he didn't finish, but is now
Okay.
a very successful lawyer. And
But he didn't finish his law degrees.
No,
But he's a lawyer now.
Yes,
Is that allowed?
yes.
Wow.
You have to work the bar. You can be other kinds of law.
Where
contract
does
law.
he work? At what?
I'm not telling you.
That's Steve Hankey saying no. Listen, Steve Hankey wants us to move on to talk about Liverpool's recent record against Brighton. I'm just going to drop this in here because we were discussing it before. But the last 6 games that the two have played against each other, only 1 win from Liverpool, 2 wins from Brighton, and a handful of draws there. Very exciting, isn't it? Now, listen, one other thing I would like to say about this game, an assist for Brighton's 18-year-old Irish player, Evan Ferguson. In 10 games, Evan Ferguson has 4 goals and 4 assists. That's a senior Brighton game this season. Looking forward to seeing more of him. But let's have a break now, shall we? And when we come back, we'll talk about the bum end of the league. The bottom end. Creeping and crawling through the crevices of the Premier League now, all the way into the sweat-infested pit of doom. Now, that was too much, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Listen, there were lots of interesting games happened at the weekend. Of course, we haven't talked about Chelsea. Chelsea, victory. Newcastle had a victory over 6th place to Fulham. But other things that happened, Everton, Southampton, big bottom of the table clash there. Everton won to Southampton. We had Nottingham Forest beating Leicester as well. Wolves beating West Ham and Brentford beating Bournemouth. A lot happening at the bottom end of the table. And when we look at it now, we see Southampton, Everton and West Ham all on 15 points in the relegation zone. Still very eminently possible that they will escape that. But Jon Mackenzie, looking at the bottom end there, having a good old look, what do you think? What are your feelings about who's going down?
Well, we've got a bottom 8, haven't we?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right, we do.
Nottingham Forest on 20 points, only 5 points off the bottom of the table,
Yeah.
and they're in 13th place.
Yeah.
And
actually 5 points off the bottom of the table, 5 points off the relegation zone, all the same thing right now. Yeah.
So it's almost impossible to say anything
It is.
predictive about the bottom of the table right now.
And that's why I'm
But
asking you to talk about Everton specifically, because Everton feel bad. And also, we should say as well that Everton's directors and owners advised by security not to attend the game. Advised by the police? Was it the police that advised them?
I think so. There's lots of videos of players being hounded in their cars. I saw Anthony Gordon
Yeah.
being chased down the street by disgruntled fans.
Right.
But yeah, Everton in a mess, right? On the field, off the field, everywhere.
I like
Any
the idea
field.
of calling a human who's chasing another human angrily disgruntled. It's a very polite way of saying
Excuse
it.
me, sir.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with your performances for my beloved club.
Yes, exactly.
That's what they were saying.
That's
Yes,
what
it
they were
sounds
saying.
quite scary. I think it's funny at all. a rare moment where I don't find something funny. Yeah, I think that's terrifying.
No, it is terrifying.
And they had one of the directors in someone had it in a headlock.
Yes.
Like, that's genuinely. We talked about this a few times. Like, the invisible walls of safety are starting to fall down. There's a lad who kicked Ramsdale in the back of the head, in his body, at the Tottenham Stadium.
Yeah.
Like, it's really dangerous that you think all these things. What happens until someone really gets hurt or something like that? Like that boy Yerry Mina, there's a video of him talking to a bunch of lads all filming on their phone. That's terrifying. Like, this guy's a young man having to deal with all these people who are much older than him, and I think that's terrifying with these young guys because they've got so much pressure and the weight responsibility. I mean, you can't take all the good stuff with fans. I guess you don't have the band, but then there's that thing. Like, Everton fans are in such a bad way at the moment. Like, really unhappy with everything that's going on. It looks like they're heading towards a drop. They're not confident in the management of Lampard or anything's happened with the last few transfer windows, the players they brought in, whether that's bad. It's just really difficult to know what to do because that bottom 8, they're all roughly the same. They're all kind of the same teams. I've put Villa in there as well. Like, some of them have changed managers and they'll start improving. Southampton look like they've turned a little bit of a corner, but all it takes is one defeat for them to suddenly look like they haven't turned a corner whatsoever. And like, that's the team they should be beating, was Everton at home, Southampton. You think that's a game that they have to win to try and turn it around, but when are they ever going to turn it? And that system they play doesn't look particularly fun. He keeps moving players around. He's had lots of injury problems as well. It's just a bad place to be.
Mess.
Yeah.
I spent a portion of my weekend on Transfermarkt. What I was looking at was the transfer expenditure for teams at the bottom of the table in the Premier League, and I think what's so interesting about the Premier League now is two things. One of the things is that it's the richest league in the world, so pretty much all of these teams have spent upwards of 120 million well, it was euros in the transfer window in the current season, which is a lot of money. Some of those teams haven't even needed to. So, for example, Brentford, a team who are well known for just being really smart in their expenditure, I think they've spent 120 million, but they haven't sold anyone. And in the past, for them to break even, they would have had to sold someone. So you can improve the level of your squad to a certain degree. But the other thing is, because there's so much money in the Premier League, no one at the bottom of the Premier League wants to go down. And so rather than setting their teams up to be teams who are going to play well and maybe climb up the table, the most important thing to do is to make sure that you stay up. And that just changes the tenor of the league as well. So you get a lot of teams just playing for draws, etc. And I think that the result of that is that we've got a very homogenous sort of bottom half of the table where there's a huge amount of talent, but you can actually get a long way by just being a super solid defensive team and not really giving much up.
It's that, and I think they're so similarly weighted as well. So that if you put, like Aston Villa versus Leeds to me is quite a similar game. Like some of the players are really good, some of them are average, but if you're looking at it on video game terms, they'd all mostly come under like a 3 or a 3.5 star team. They're all very much kind of similar. So what, like a lot of Premier League games to me are really boring because it's just two teams who are quite good, and all that happens is they mash into each other for about 60 minutes. Then someone makes a tiny error or as a penalty.
Or a massive error if you're Leeds United.
Yeah, something like that, right? And then that decides a game. It doesn't really matter because you play it again, the other team would win. It's just completely, and then people's entire careers are made out of that. So if you happen to get the luck twice in a row, that's you 6 points up. That could be how you get that European slot. Just that one season is that two little decisions in your way. Or little things go against you, in a row. And look at West Ham are stuck in that relegation thing. They spent heaps of money. Moyes is trying to transition his team to play in a certain kind of way. They bought that boy Aguerd quite early, and he got injured really early, didn't he? The same way that Villa, Gerrard bought Diego Carlos at Villa, really, really depending on him to make a big difference, and they got injured. So you can't have that sort of thing. There's loads of little decisions that go against you when you're that evenly weighted. It's really hard to make the small differences, but then you put in someone like Lopetegui, and already like Wolves look a bit better, straight away with that. And like Unai Emery, you can see very clear things that he's changed at Aston Villa. But you get this, I think I talked about this last week, is that they come in, and if the first couple of games go well, the players will be like, oh, I believe in this. This might work, and you can really get the momentum behind it. Whereas if Lampard comes in and goes, right guys, you've got to work really hard now, playing this 5-4-1 that offers very little other than crosses into the box, or a disjointed midfield, a centre-back group doesn't look that strong. They're like, oh my God, I've got to grind this out. And then you start getting scared at pressure, and then you come out of your stadium and you're getting surrounded by fans who are going nuts, and you hear about stuff in the boardroom. That must be not fun. So how do you possibly get happy to be able to come into it? I mean, I always talk about Football Manager, and it's not actual real life, but a lot of that game, being good at it, it's just getting the players to have good morale. That's all it is. Tactics don't matter. If you have good players and you have the morale up, that's basically how you win stuff. And I think for a long time I thought that was stupid, but now I'm starting to think that actually there's a lot of psychology to that I never really thought of.
Having said that, the teams in 6th, 7th and 8th right now in the Premier League are Fulham, Brighton and Brentford, who all have decent managers. So I agree with you. Once it gets to
high morale though.
Yeah, no, because they're winning, right? And
but also those teams you would say all have managers who instill a kind of positivity in the players, and the squads really like them, and their morale is high.
Well, I mean, you say that, but Roberto De Zerbi apparently has fallen out with Leandro Trossard, which is why he's moving on.
You've got to pick one, though, haven't you? Pick one and sacrifice. Back to the sacrificial pyre.
I agree with what you're both saying, but I do think that you can get a huge amount of upside if you do get a smart manager.
Oh, no, I totally agree. Yeah. Like, if you took Thomas Frank or De Zerbi or, Marco Silva out of Fulham, and you put them in Everton, I think they'd be better. Yeah. I don't want to absolutely bury Lampard.
But we're talking about margins. We're not talking about foundations or fundamentals.
Sure, but there's certain things that those coaches would have that I think you maybe lack in other managers. I don't know enough about, as we call him, Luton Jones, the Southampton manager. To know,
what a performance he's had, by the way, since we buried him last week.
Yeah. Well, moving Ward Prowse into number 10 it makes absolute sense because he's not as good deeper, it turns out. So you put him higher up the pitch.
Scores goals.
And he just can do stuff.
That
He's really
free kick, by the way, that he scored over the weekend, it doesn't look impressive because of how low it is by the time it gets into the goal. But when you watch it on the replay, and you see that, he just clears the wall, that jump, and then it dips so much that it hits the floor before it hits the net. It's insane.
Remember that video we did in IRL with, I've forgotten his name, Bartek?
We never made it.
We did. Went out.
Did it?
Yes.
Did it?
Did all right, yeah.
Did it go out?
Yeah, what's his name? Bartek Silvestrak. Bartek Silvestrak.
Yeah.
So he's a kicking coach.
Yeah.
That was his title. He was at Brentford for a long time. So he works with a lot of players outside of their training to develop their free kick and their general ball striking skills.
Yeah.
And he says that Messi's not a very good ball striker. So I think that doesn't sound right, but this guy, professional ball striker, coach, works with all these players. And the player he says the best of all time at free kicks is Juninho Pernambucano, the Brazilian who is genuinely amazing. And then after talking to him for a while, he said Ward Prowse is the only player who really has that technique. And what makes you good at free kicks and that ball striking is consistency of always hitting the ball in the same way and being able to put it in either location of the goal, like the top left or bottom right. Also, he's got a knuckleball on him as well, Ward Prowse. Remember early in the season? Was it this season? I think it was like 35, 40 yards.
Yeah.
This guy is unbelievably good at that sort of stuff. And if he can develop as that number 10, pressing second striker or attacking midfielder, that's really useful.
He's really a freak. A dead ball freak.
A lot of work went into that. Yeah.
Anyway, listen, we've got to move on because I want to talk very briefly, John, about Napoli 5-1 Juventus. Big tie. It was between 1 and 2 in Serie A the time it took place, I believe, and now 1 and 3. Milan scooting ahead again of Juventus into second place. Napoli, a statement victory to continue to lead Serie A. 47 points, 9-point gap between them and Milan in second now.
Yeah, and Juventus came into this game on a bit of a hot run. So a lot of people were saying, is this, are Juventus inevitable? Is this going to be them coming good again? Putting the title challenge really front and centre in Italy. But didn't happen that way. And Juventus again, and we're talking about a lot of clubs who are sort of have a messy context both on and off the field. And Juventus very much in that ballpark at the moment as well, allegedly wanting to move managers on but not being able to because of financial reasons, etc. So it's an interesting situation that Allegri sort of turned things around for them very much because they were mid-table early on in the season and then pushed right the way up. But this game very much nailing Napoli's credentials as the best team in Serie A. And I don't think that a lot of people were doubting that because I think a lot of the games that Juventus have been winning recently have been sort of close 1-0 wins and not necessarily the most impressive performances, but Napoli just came out and did what Napoli do in this game, and Juventus couldn't keep up at all. And what Napoli are doing is, there's been lots of quotes going around from Luciano Spalletti, the coach of Napoli, talking about how modern football doesn't use structure anymore, and talking about how it's all about exploiting space in a much more fluid way. And this is what Napoli were doing. Really, what I've noticed from them in the games that I've watched of them recently, just really, really quick one-touch passing, moving the ball around, really not letting defences settle, and playing the ball around until they can find those gaps in particularly advanced areas. And they've got Victor Osimhen, who we've talked about a lot in the context of potential number 9 for Manchester United on our sensible transfer video, but he's just a really fun player to watch. Real threat in behind.
It's 12 goals in 14 games.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And with, I think, that combination of players who are really good technical players on the ball, and then really exciting aggressive direct players in players like Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen as well, really making for quite good watching at the moment. Napoli may be the best team in Europe in a lot of respects to watch.
Okay, well, there we go. I think that's the end of the podcast. You want to add anything?
Barcelona are amazing against Real Madrid. Gavi was unbelievable. He's 18. I can't believe how good this guy is at 18. It's crazy. Like, I love Pedri, and he was also brilliant. He does all these. He's very Iniesta, like some of the things he does with his like double touch and stuff.
Gavi
like
or Pedri?
Pedri. But Gavi was just running the show.
Yeah.
Oh, they just couldn't get close to him. And I don't remember watching the player so good, so young. Well, Pedri, maybe, I guess.
The other midfielder.
Yes, but then Pedri's is a slightly different kind of player, and Gavi makes things happen slightly further up, so it's more exciting. It's fun to watch. I mean, they're top of the league, Barcelona as well, and that's them won the Super Cup. And so you'd think that might be a little thing to help them kick on and know they're going in the right direction. They have patience in Xavi, it might work. Yeah.
I heard something about over the weekend. I heard that VAR was abandoned in the Aberdeen game.
Yeah, this was bad. So there's a couple of like big referees. I know people moan about the refereeing in Premier League, say it's an all-time low. They've got no idea. No idea. Refereeing in Scotland is embarrassing, and it has been for many years. It's like ludicrous decisions all the time. But what you had, Rangers beat Aberdeen in the League Cup semi-final. It was a League Cup semi-final weekend. Both games played at Hampden. And, Scotland's quite wet in January, isn't it? Yeah, all the time. But yes. January especially.
Yeah. The first month, I believe. Jeez. The rainy season.
Yeah. Celtic and Kilmarnock played on Saturday, chopped the pitch up like it was a rugby game, and there was a penalty not given to Kelly, which is clearly a penalty. The defender comes straight through the back of a guy waiting for the ball and flattens him. Yeah. VAR didn't pick it up. Fine, maybe they just didn't see enough to overturn it. I think it's a surprising decision, but also I don't think it's surprising at all in Scotland. Not to do with, I don't think there's some sort of conspiracy with the old firm either, by the way, before anyone starts thinking that. I think it's just incompetence. And then in the Sunday game, it's not incompetence, but it's just embarrassing in that VAR, the connection just stopped, basically.
The connection.
So there was just no VAR for, right. I think, extra time, which is unfortunate.
It's only after the 100th minute. They had 100 minutes of VAR. What more do they want?
Yeah, that's true.
No,
it's like they use their 3 minutes.
You can have too much of a good thing, That's what I always say.
Yeah. And then there's an incident that I'd like to see more about. Ryan Kent, a Rangers player, appears to just lash out a little bit at Aberdeen's Liam Scales, and you think in VAR... Scales. You think that might have possibly been a red card, which would have levelled the things, because the Aberdeen captain had got himself sent off for trying to put Fashion Sakala out of the stadium with a tackle.
Right.
Rangers haven't had a penalty in something like 39 games or something.
Really?
Is that right? Just putting that one out.
Conspiracy.
Conspiracy.
There is no conspiracy. It's just that certain referees are not very good in Scotland. I go harsh on it just to make myself sort of laugh at it because it's ridiculous. It's also pointless supporting the Scottish club apart from Rangers. It's just pointless. Absolutely. But there's no point. If we'd beaten Rangers and got through to the final, we had to beat Celtic, and we wouldn't do that. Yeah. You need to have everything go your way.
Will you do your impression of me again? I like it when you do that.
Hello, I'm Joe Devine.
It's good, isn't it?
It's not. I had it better before.
Well,
I had it better before.
Ooh. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast.
I do that.
John, Manchester United.
Well, anyway, here we go. it's the end of the podcast now, and we've
Well,
reached-
actually, I think you'll find.
Hey, he's doing himself. Look at that.
That's offensive. I find that offensive.
That's what you are, though. You're an actually. I
cancelled
think you'll
myself.
find. No, listen. When
Can we delete this episode of the podcast?
Yes.
This is good.
Does this
What
one
are you
have
talking
to go out?
Yeah, it does. Listen, when I found you on Twitter, you were just a little sand crab, going, and now look what I've made you, yeah? I've made you a hero of the people, of the goblins.
And the crabs.
The
And the
goblin
crabs.
folk.
Hero of the crabs. Okay, well, there we go. That's the end of the podcast there. End of a choppy podcast. Thank you, JJ Bull the Bullet.
Yes.
And thank you to Jonathan Dog Mackenzie.
Yes.
Thanks to Steve Hankey and Craig Silcock, producers for today. We'll be back next week. There's a little wave. You can see them in the background there. You see them? Yeah, John, get your head out of the way. Oh, God. Anyway, that's fine. Listen, we'll be back next week with Seb Stafford Bloor rejoining us from his travels. We'll get to hear about which bit of Germany he visited while he was on holiday. That's nice. And until then, take care, all the best, and bienvenue. Hey? Hey?
What does that mean, bienvenue?
Good night. I think.
Welcome.
Welcome.